Hey, and we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from beautiful downtown Blue Ridge. You know, yesterday, 70 degrees. It's warm. The leaves are changing. The color is beautiful in the mountains. Great weekend for a drive. Come up and spend a weekend in Blue Ridge, Georgia. We're at Blue Jeans Pizza right here, and I'm with Dr. William Whaley, and we want to thank Georgia Cancer Specialists for sponsoring this segment. Welcome back, Dr. Whaley. How are you?
Oh, thank you very much.
Do you travel with Tab?
I do.
Do you travel with it?
I do.
Okay.
I had a hard time finding one in the Cornell University Marriott this past weekend, and the guy says, "You know, you're the second guy to ask me in 2 days for tabs." He says, "Both of you are old." I got Coke New Zero at his place. It was terrible. It wasn't terrible.
Well, you every time. I don't think I've ever said this to you, but every time you bring that tab, I think of the case that my mom kept on the back porch of Tab that we put in the refrigerator. So that takes me back. So we want to, first of all, we want to thank you for Dr. Jennifer Jones. We met her last week.
Isn't she good, huh?
Oh, absolutely. We just really enjoyed meeting her, and she did an outstanding job with the questions. So, but then we also want to say, since Dr. Tidman wasn't able to be here, he sent us a couple corny jokes.
I know. I watched the first 20 minutes because they were before they closed the door on the airplane, and Jennifer began talking about the narcotic, new narcotic law,
yes,
which I thought was very educational. And people better get used to the idea that they can't go to their family practitioner and get their Xanax refilled after January 1. Are they going to go into the computer and the guy's going to say, "Look, I think, well, you know, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to change things." And I think she was right on with that.
Well, let me ask you this. We're glad to have you back, but you always bring a lot of documents where you do a lot of research for our viewers, and I tell you that every week. If you have a question, info at FetcherNews.com. Dr. Whaley does a lot of research when he's on the plane and traveling and visiting family at Cornell University. Do you want to start right into questions, or do you have something this morning to open with?
To be honest with you, I actually spend 2 or 3 hours every week doing this thing, if not more. I learned something last week at Cornell that tells me how old I am. I am aware that politically correct, I'm not terribly politically correct, but this girl's mother is my Ivy League daughter. I think I told you 35 years ago at Wellesley was talking about these women. What my daughter told me when Manafort was appointed by Trump way back when, my daughter is really connected in New York and is a big financial supporter of the other side, as you remember. She's a dark sider. She said, "Manafort's a crook. He needs to get Manafort out of his leadership. Everybody in New York knows he's a crook." Well, I never even heard of Manafort. And here it is a year and 4 months later or something, and he's all over the front page of the newspaper. Well, anyway, it's her daughter. Here we are at Cornell University, and I said, "What's the name of our waitress?" Man, you'd have thought I'd cussed. She looks at me like this. "What did you say?" I says, "What's the name of our waitress?" "That's not a waitress. That's a server. Waitress is a pejorative, sexist, feminist term or some daggone thing like that. You don't call them stewardesses anymore, do you?" I said, "Yeah, I do if they're female." "You can't do that. Flight attendants." Anyway, so I wasn't in charge last weekend. This 18-year-old college freshman was teaching her granddaddy about the new world. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say, let's see. Well, I'm going to double down on that. You know, I can't let that go. All right. Now, I'm not trying to get in trouble, but waitress, okay. I guess I
can't do it.
I hung out in the diner too many years. Okay, but I'm going to say this, and let's see how much trouble I get. For the most part, these young ladies, these nice young ladies that wait tables, that used to be called waitresses, they tend to look at the bottom of that check
and they do.
And see what that tip was.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
So I think that's where they get most offended, is if is if you go in there and spend $50 and you leave a $2 tip, you know. So I don't think they get as offended to be called a waitress. So I don't know.
Well,
Maybe
you're going
did I get in
one
trouble?
step. Yes,
Right?
you are. You're getting one step beyond that, because the next step beyond that is the casting couch and Weinstein.
No. We need to move on to the question.
Weinstein. I'm just
Whoa,
saying,
whoa.
if you have the feeling that you are rewarding this young woman for your ability to call her a waitress by a big tip.
No, I just want
what's
to
the
refill on my
difference?
Coke.
What's the big difference between being a director like Weinstein and grabbing a little flesh
Our first question of
and
the day.
thinking that you are rewarded for that, and you're able to do that because you're going to give her a part in the movie. I'm just trying to say, how big is the... Anyway, wait, let's go to some questions. You got to have a little controversy here. What question you want to go to?
I did ask for it, folks. I did ask for it.
What question?
Okay.
Let's go.
I just want them to come back and refill my Coke. That's
All right.
I'm looking
Okay.
for.
But there's server. Server, can you please come? Or bus person, not bus boy now anymore. Bus person. Go ahead.
Okay. What a segue into our first question. My doctor recently commented that I have loose joints. What does this mean?
It means that when you get that paper, you're supposed to lick it and then tighten it a whole bunch more when you've got the... All right.
Are we going to get anywhere today?
Yeah, we are. Okay. This is really a great question because the tendency to use that term, and I want to begin really by first of all, the sex of the asker was not there, and the age of the asker was not there.
Okay.
All right.
So it is. Wait. Let me go back real quick, not to interrupt. My doctor recently commented that I have loose joints. What does that mean? So there is a difference if it's a male or a female, and it's a difference in the age. What it is. Okay.
I'm going to start with the broad universe of that concept of loose joints. Over here on the tech board is a young adolescent, young 20s female. And up to 20% or so of females more than males in their teenage years and adolescence, Sam, go to that one with the thumb, if you would, please, have loose joints because they're not yet, like ours, old and contracted and having a bunch of knee pain and stuff, and they can do things like pull their thumb down against their forearm, or they can do like this and make their elbow go back, and that's about 20% of females more than males, Asians and East Africans more than Anglo-Saxons, and as they go out of their teens and 20s, they become more rigid and get more like you and I. But they then are told by their doctor they have loose joints. That is not a pathological condition, and it is not a disease. It does make have you got the thumb up there, Sam? It does make it a little more likely that they can have certain sports injuries, like if it's the knee that's lax in a 13, 14-year-old girl playing soccer, that she might have more in the way of knee instability. A tennis player might have more in the way of wrist instability or something of that sort. This degree of thumb mobility that you see here is pathological. That group of people is about 3% of the population, and that condition that is known as hypermodal joint syndrome, or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and let's don't use a bunch of people's names, is a pathological condition that when it occurs in various degrees, it can be nothing more than that. Show the elbow picture, Sam, and then just go on and show the back picture. When it becomes more than that, and you're going to see elbows behind the back here and elbows that straighten out, this is a lifelong condition. It represents some totally misunderstood and not yet fully characterized alteration in the character of cartilage and ligaments, and it's associated in its disease form, very small number of people, with lax skin. So you'll see people who grab this and pull it out to here, with bladder relaxation in females. You know, women who've had 8 or 10 kids, they say, my bladder fell and I had to have a surgical procedure. But that bladder falling can occur in teenagers and people who've never had pregnancy. And it can lead then to a significant amount of injury because they have poor understanding. You know, when I got my head turned like this and my eyes closed, I can take my finger and put it in my ear, or this finger and put it in my nose, because I have proprioception, and my brain, my muscles, and my tendons tell me with my eyes closed where things are. When people have this real mobile joint syndrome, they do not have that degree of proprioception. So let's say they're walking across a field, and when it's dark, they're not as good as we are at hitting the ground and having their feet tell them where they are. So they can fall, they can have joint injuries and things of that sort. Now, let's go back again to the relatively normal 20% of people who have hypermodal joints, or to that diseased group of Ehlers-Danlos who have very mild cases. Some of the greatest violinists in the world have been people who had that. If you got that elbow picture in there, that it is an advantage in in music. Maybe that in the piano their fingers can go out and get more keys. In a violin they can get their arm around in the way you and I can't do. In athletics, the high jump, some of these conditions are associated with being taller than normal. That generally is called Marfan syndrome, and some of the greatest basketball players of the last 50 years who have been African American, thin, not terribly well muscled, tended to have a high head and could leap up and take that big old arm and go whack like that, had a condition called Marfan syndrome, which was one of these joint laxity conditions, and it obviously makes them better able to play the sport. You still with me? Mm-hmm. All right. So now you've got this spectrum from just a teenage girl who can do this, is going to stop being able to do it when she's 20, all the way over here to people whose joints are so lax they've been doubled and they can do this, and they can put their feet behind their head and they contort, and they go into circuses. To this group in the middle that are really advantaged in basketball or advantaged in certain sports because they have a less severe case of it. So it's really a great question. And if you have any concern that the loose laxity is an actual disease and not one of these normal developmental things, that gets you out of the office of your family practitioner, because the family practitioner generally would send you to a center of excellence like a rheumatology place to Atlanta or Gainesville or somewhere where they've got a good rheumatologist, because these conditions can be associated with lax aortic valves and things around the heart that make it liable for sudden and unexpected death. And those basketball players with Marfan syndrome all get echocardiograms to look at their heart valve and make sure that they're not liable to cardiac death. You may hear some great high school kid who's in 11th grade and they were going to take him to go to the NBA and they're going to play for the Celtics, but he flunked his physical based on his echocardiogram. He may well have flunked because of this Marfan's thing, and they'll never let him play in professional athletics. Is that enough?
Well,
Sam, is that enough? You learned more than you wanted to show?
I don't want to.
Did you show all of them?
I don't want to say.
You showed the back and the elbows behind and everything.
I don't want to say that wasn't great information. I don't want to say I didn't understand it, but sadly enough, I understood the loose joint at the beginning with the rolling paper better. So maybe, did I say that out loud?
You did, yeah.
Okay, I shouldn't say it. I didn't say that. Erase that. That didn't happen. Okay, here's one. I'm having trouble sleeping lately. Does this increase my chances of getting sick? The chance of me getting sick because I'm not sleeping well, does that go up?
Lately is a poorly defined term.
Okay.
For some people, it means this past weekend. For those of us with a lot of patience, and I've got tremendous patience, it might mean 2 years. So we're going to give it 90 days.
Okay. So that's what we're putting this window into the
We
answer, 90 days.
First of all, we got to have a time frame. What's lately mean?
For the last 3 months, I'm not sleeping well.
All right. Greater than or lesser than 90 days. And the second is, what do you mean by not sleeping well? So insomnia, by definition, is 3 nights a week of inability to have any form of good, restful sleep. And so that's the definition of I'm not sleeping well, not just 2 or 3 nights because dogs are barking, or 2 or 3 nights because you're harboring some joint that bothered you because you were, making a picket fence and your elbow hurt. So if you have 3 nights without being able to sleep, and that's interfering with your daytime alertness, it is interfering with your ability to focus on your job. There's an outcome to it, and it lasts greater than 90 days. You have reached the definition of chronic insomnia, and that generally is not related to job stress, not related to worrying about failing in school, not related to worrying about your kid being off in college in the first 3 months. I mean, those kind of things that would keep a normal person awake. And you go straight from that complaint to a sleep study, and you go to a sleep specialist. Less than 90 days. First of all, you try and figure it out yourself. I mean, is my husband's job in jeopardy, or we having financial problems? Am I sick? Am I having nausea or gastric reflux or whatever? And most of that lasts less than 90 days is the result of something else. And when you've gotten rid of the result of the something else, the insomnia gets better. So the insomnia didn't cause you to have the gastroesophageal reflux or the chronic anxiety over your husband's loss of job or your child or whatever. It was the result. But yes, those two things are related, being sleeping poorly and disease. Now let's go back to the guy that's really got the insomnia issue. It's been going on for months. He went to his doctor. He doesn't have reflux. He got himself one of those sleep number beds. He's got a big old pad on it. He got the white noise music in the background. These are all the normal things of sleep hygiene, which we'll come back to in a minute. He drinks no caffeinated beverages at all in 24 hours. He does not have spicy food after 4 o'clock. He doesn't drink a whole bunch of liquids. And the next is the sanctity of the location in which you are sleeping. I use this example. Do you usually eat your breakfast in the toilet? And the answer is no. And then I say, well, do you do your toilet facilities in the kitchen? And the answer is no. I says, well, what do you do in your bed? Well, I watch television for a couple hours, and I turn the light off, and I write letters, and I read books. So in that situation, your bed is not associated with the actual habit of sleep. So simply by taking the television out of the bedroom, taking writing materials and reading materials out of the bedroom, and devoting the bedroom to the activities of sleep or sex, and then getting in the habit of going in there for those two things, you may get rid of the sleep disturbance. You still with me?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I threw the sex in there just for you. All right, so once you have done the sleep...
Moving right along.
Once you have done the sleep hygiene things that your doctor told you to do, that's all that caffeine stuff, You've got the bedroom where it's nothing but a sleep place, and now you go in there and you're still having trouble sleeping. And most sleep problems, by the way, go away if you do all that sleep disturbance stuff. If it lasts more than 90 days, you go off to the sleep guy. But yes, that type of sleep disturbance can cause high blood pressure. It can be associated with peptic ulcer disease. It can be associated with psychiatric disorders and stress and depression. And I think that's more than you want to know about. I'm not sleeping too good. Can it make me sick?
Okay, Dr. Whaley.
Sam, was that enough?
I'm just thinking on the third question, what will we get on this?
Do you write letters or watch television in your bedroom, Sam?
I do watch TV.
Get the TV out of there.
All right, let's move on. Let's just keep Sam putting pictures up right now, okay? not answering too many. Not answering too many questions.
We may have to invest in him a filter also.
Okay, moving right along. Now, I like this question because, let's see, can someone have a panic attack while sleeping? Can you have a panic attack while sleeping?
Are there any parents in the room? All right, the parents in the room, have any of your children, grandchildren, or any guest children in your home ever suffered from what you would call night terrors? Okay, we got a nod. All right, so I'm using that as an example.
All right, I understand.
Because
okay.
most of our audience will know some child, some grandchild, or somebody's child who suffered what are called night terrors. This is a childhood disorder of having a terror spell in their sleep. You are told not to wake them up. You're told to pick them up and comfort them and make sure they don't bang their head on the edge of this thing and hurt themselves. That will generally last 10 to 20 minutes. It will resolve without the child awakening, and then the child goes back to sleep. We go forward now to adulthood. There are a lot of sleep disorders. There are 7 characteristics of sleep disorders. But one of the characteristic sleep disorders, and we've done this once before, we talked about periodic jerking motions when people were waking up or falling asleep. It was one of the questions. And those are disordered sleep movement disorders. Well, there are panic and dissociative events that can occur while you are asleep in the non-pediatric group that are terrifying. They are absolute true panic disorder, and they can even be associated with dissociation, which is the idea that things aren't right. I'm out of my normal environment, or they can be associated with hallucinations. They can be associated with visual or auditory hallucinations, and they can be quite frightening. And the answer to the question, therefore, is yes. I could go a lot farther with sleep disorders, but you don't.
I thought about panic attacks when you're sleeping, and I just wondered, because I have actually been somewhere where somebody was asleep, and just all of a sudden they're like, "Whoa, what just happened?" And they had a panic attack. I've actually.
Okay. Now
I want to say something silly.
Right.
This is real, but it's not. It's silly.
Right.
It might sound silly. My dog runs in her sleep.
Yes. Okay. Well, now you're getting back into the sleep disorders.
I understand. Now, I'm serious. That might sound silly, but
it's not silly at all.
My dog all of a sudden will take off, and it's like it's like she's chasing something, but she sounds
lying down doing
this.
Yes. Okay. Well, actually, when we do it, we call it somnambulism or sleepwalking. And you'll remember that we all have had people we know that sleepwalk. So if you take the various sleep disorders and you have somnambulism or sleepwalking, and you associate that sleepwalking with a post-traumatic stress disorder patient who, whether it's a military post-traumatic stress disorder, a survivor of rape, or a bad motor vehicle accident or something, then you have created this environment where you've got somebody that's up, moving around, not aware of what's going on, upon whom there's the second sleep disorder or psychiatric disorder or whatever kind of disorder you want to put it, of post-traumatic stress. In that period after World War II, most in terms of numbers, there are many, 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 many women who I have known in my practice life who said that they either slept in a separate bed or a separate bedroom for various durations of time, from the time their husbands returned from the end of World War II, some for weeks or months, some for their entire marriage, because the husband wanted to protect me, the wife, from being hurt when he had his nighttime reactions. And those nighttime reactions could be a redo of a battle or something in a foxhole where he'd get up and hit people. We didn't hear much more about it until after the Vietnam era. And after the Vietnam era, you know, it depends on how many people actually get in combat and get shot at and get scared to death, but it became more prominent again. So that idea that you can have panic or you can have this type of reaction in your sleep, not terribly common, but it's very common enough for everybody to know something about it. And then you really get yourself a hazard if you get a sleepwalker, a somnambulist, who also has that type of panic thing, because what can he do? He can go out and punch somebody up, he can go outside and hurt himself, he can get in his automobile and do something stupid. So pretty good question, actually.
Well, Dr. Whaley, I appreciate you answering that extra question I had, because that's what I was thinking when I went there. But is there anything today before we close that you've done so much research here? You were on the plane. We found out last weekend was it Cornell University where you were at?
Yes.
So you learned a little bit there, and you shared that with us. Anything else before we close?
Yeah, I think there's been a real watershed change in the last 6 days in the immunization advice about shingles. You saw Sunday mention of a new shingles vaccine called Shingles. I've never discouraged the idea of getting a shingles shot when we've talked about health maintenance here, but I have said it does not prevent you from getting shingles so much as it reduces by 70% the chances that you will have a disabling post-shingles pain syndrome, and that's what the drug was made for. This new vaccine is much more effective. It is 90% effective in preventing shingles at all. The other one wasn't even touted as preventing shingles at all. This one's 90% effective.
It was more. The other one was more for reducing the pain.
Getting a case of shingles, yes, but a lesser case, and it would lead to less pain. Well, this is prevention. 90%.
Interesting.
And the other one wasn't near as effective for people who are over the age of 65 or 70, and that's most of the people who get shingles. So the CDC has the Recommendation Council from the CDC to the FDA, and the FDA hasn't ruled on it yet, is most likely to recommend that even though you had the old shingles shot, and if you had it last week or last year, get the new shingles shot. Secondly, it lowered the age from 60 to 50. You know, most of us around here are 50. Third, the cost is going to be less. Now, how many things that are a lot more effective are going to be less expensive? And it is now no longer a violation of doctor-patient relationship, because there was a big article on Zell Miller's removal from public office, took up a whole 2 pages of the Atlanta newspaper 2 weeks ago, and it mentioned that he had an attack of shingles that had left him with pain and paralysis in a leg that caused him to have multiple falls. Well, I'm his doctor, and
you're Zell Miller's doctor.
Well, but now that he's up there not coming back, yeah, I have been for 35 years. So the point I'm making is that Zell Miller has been disabled from his occupation and what could have been years of more thinking and writing books because he got the shingles. Now, there are several other prominent people in our community who are disabled because they got shingles in a motor nerve, not a sensory nerve, and it led to paralysis. And if this shot can prevent that, and it's going to be relatively cheap, I don't want all these conspiracy theorists people telling me they'll put mercury in it and it's the government trying to take over and cause autism and the Illuminati kicking over the government.
All right.
In other words, my wife.
See, I tried to stop you. You cannot say I didn't try to stop you before you.
Oh, and one more thing.
Oh.
This is my last Friday before the election.
No.
And I'm now going to speak and say that my wife's name is not on the ballot. It's been blacked out. But I have been told that there are a number of voters in Blue Ridge, Georgia, who when they get to that place are writing Jane Allison Whaley in there as a write-in candidate. You'll remember she's my 34-year-old counseling daughter who lives in Blue Ridge, where Jane could have said, I live in her house. So if you want to show a little support, just write Jane Allison Whaley as a write-in at that spot, and people will know you support the new regime.
I thought we were not going political, but you changed it all up, didn't you?
I know,
So,
yes.
Okay. But that is okay. You do whatever you want. You drink that tab, and I'm glad you were able to find a tab at Cornell University last weekend. I'm your host, BKP. Thank you, Georgia Cancer Specialist, for this segment of Ask the Doc every week. You can always find this on FetchYourNews.com. We clip this segment out. We have it on our YouTube channel, Fetch Your News, FYN TV channel on YouTube, also Fetch Your News, and you can share this with your friends. It's great information from the Georgia Cancer Specialist. Thank you. When we get back, running just a little behind, it's time for the All-Star panel. We have Fetch Football Friday and the Pet of the Week, so we got a lot left here at Blue Jeans Pizza in Blue Ridge. Take us to break, Sam.